Mundo S.A. HSBC, Gestão de Patrimônio do HSBC, seu futuro com mais opções. E Fiat, líder de vendas pela 11ª vez.
Não perca amanhã o principal assunto do dia em debate no Entre Aspas. Nem toda marcha é revolta. Nem todo véu é submissão. Nem todo grito é dor. Nem toda lágrima é tristeza. Nem todo soldado é guerra. Nem toda fronteira é eterna. Nem todo silêncio é paz.
Jornalista busca informação, processa informação e entrega informação. Agora, isso aí é o resumo de uma coisa muito complexa. Eu sempre acho que o mais marcante é o que está por vir. O jornalismo econômico é uma janela que explica bastante o mundo. Você tem que olhar para a política, para o social, para todas as outras questões da vida, mas a partir da janela econômica. Viver nesse mundo da informação, eu nunca tive dúvidas. Então eu entrei com 18 anos no jornalismo por acaso e para sempre. Jornalista é o que eu sou.
Há algo de novo no ar. Dá para sentir a diferença. Mudou para melhor. E o amanhã será melhor ainda. Inspirados por nosso passado, mas impulsionados pelo futuro. Estamos nos tornando uma nova American.
Okay, let's go, sir.
Neva sobre Londres e o táxi que nos leva ao encontro do hacker Julian Asange se desloca devagar. Quando ele entrou aqui, como exilado político, no espaço modesto que a Embaixada do Equador ocupa em Knightsbridge, era verão e fazia calor. 7 meses se passaram e, como em julho, chova ou faça sol, a Scotland Yard mantém o prédio cercado e o fareja 24 horas por dia. Os policiais em vigilância ostensiva partilham a rua com ativistas que se revezam pedindo liberdade para o homem-chave do Wikileaks, a maior fonte de vazamento na internet de documentos secretos de governos poderosos. Tornaram-se públicos o manual de procedimento do exército americano com os prisioneiros de Guantánamo, relatórios sobre os massacres de civis no Iraque e centenas de telegramas trocados entre o governo dos Estados Unidos e suas 274 embaixadas, inclusive sobre a espionagem contra aliados nas Nações Unidas. Hoje, na tarde gelada londrina, os defensores internacionais de Assange na frente do prédio são apenas 3. Uma chilena, um irlandês, um italiano. Trazem cópias de um manifesto de feministas suecas que lutam contra os estupros e que denunciam como farsa o processo que ele deveria responder na Suécia por este crime, um crime que ele diz que não cometeu. O medo de Assange é o de ser extraditado para os Estados Unidos, onde foi aberta uma investigação criminal que pode levá-lo a uma viagem sem volta pelas prisões americanas, e onde ele vem sendo ameaçado de morte. Confinado na embaixada, Julian Asange fala agora através de um livro. Cypherpunk, Liberdade e Futuro da Internet, que está sendo lançado no Brasil pela editora Boitempo. Um livro que, como afirma em sua primeira frase de introdução, não é um manifesto, é um aviso. Este aviso é o tema central de nossa cronometrada entrevista.
Julian, as a starting point, of course we can say that this book is a way of being a step forward and beyond your confinement, a way to spread your ideas. But they are not just your ideas, they are ideas of an international group who has been working for quite a long time in what you call a new architecture for the internet. I would introduce them because I think it's important. Jacob Appelbaum from San Francisco, the German Andy Müller-Magun, the co-founder of the Chaos Computer Club in Berlin, the largest hackers association in
the world.
Mm-hmm. And Jeremy Zimmerman, the founder of La Quadrature du Net, who had a very important role on defeating the ACTA in
probably the most important internet political organization in Europe.
So for how long and how have you been working together?
Well, it's important to understand that this is not just a matter that concerns the internet. These ideas have been developing for over 20 years, and they concern the merger between all of society and the internet, and that's happened now. So all our personal communications between government departments, within government departments, between states, happen over the internet. So the internet has fully penetrated what we would have called first and second world societies, and it even has had substantial penetrations amongst the state and business apparatus of even very poor developing world countries. So this is not a book about the internet, this is a book about modern civilization. Modern civilization and the internet has no separation. We can look back and see some of the tendencies that are described by this book, the interplay between technology and the democratization of technology and the power of states. To say George Orwell, just the other day I read an essay published in the Tribune, October 19, 1945, where Orwell looks at...
You quote Orwell in your book.
Yeah, although I wasn't aware of this essay when I wrote the book, but it's really fascinating to see that as far back as 45, Orwell was looking at the democratization of arms. And his view was that the history of civilization is the history of arms. And some arms, such as the flintlock rifle, are things that small groups of people can use these, individuals can use these, whereas nuclear weapons, which was the big concern of that time, are inherently only producible by major states. And so in this battle between technology that is only available to a very centralized state apparatus, just perhaps 2 or 3 superpowers, and technology that is available to most individuals or smaller groups, we see what's happened in the post-war environment, which is, at least until about 10 years ago, which was the breaking up of the world into 3 major power groups. What's interesting now is that there's a new technological battle, a new arms race. And that new arms race is between, on the one hand, mass surveillance systems, which are available to those groups that are able to intercept flows of telecommunications between entire continents.
Would you say that Aaron Swartz, who dramatically committed suicide some days ago, was part of this group?
He was more than part of that group. He is someone who actively was assisting WikiLeaks. And part of the reason that the crackdown happened on Swartz in the beginning of 2011 was that it was part of a neo-McCarthyist fervour about WikiLeaks post-Cablegate. So I don't know if your audience remembers this, but Cablegate's revelation started on November 29, 2010, and the United States and its Western allies became absolutely obsessed by it. Politicians across the board called for my assassination. Joseph Biden, the Vice President of the United States, likened me to a high-tech terrorist. New legislation was put to the Congress and to the Senate to declare us enemy combatants so that we could be targeted outside the law like Al-Qaeda, et cetera, et cetera. So the crackdown on Swartz happened on January 4th. So as part of that crackdown, we had a lot of support in the Boston area, and Swartz was from Boston. So the case against him is part of that hysteria that we kicked off. And Schwartz was a friend of mine, so the absurd prosecution against him, just absurd, and its disproportionality comes out of this desire by the US government to try and look tough against internet activists. The Obama administration has engaged in more prosecutions against national security whistleblowers than all previous administrations combined. In fact, it's more than double all previous administrations combined.
So we're talking about a power that it's over the power. I mean, it's over the states. And I would like to quote you. The world is galloping into a new transnational dystopia under the domination of mass surveillance industry that took shape over, we could say, the last 2-3 decades. So please could describe us the current frame of this dystopia and tell me if it is possible to say that internet has become the largest storage of personal information of mankind?
The internet has become the most significant spy machine that has ever been invented, ever. It puts the previous penetrations by, say, the Stasi in East Germany of the German population to shame. We're now talking about a situation where individuals around the world, companies around the world, government departments around the world are putting very fine detailed information about their lives and transactions into central services and across telecommunications lines, which are then intercepted or are available to principally United States intelligence. There's a few other players involved in this as well. Russian intelligence within a limited area, British intelligence, French intelligence. And then at national levels, there's been a commercialization of the equipment that is done for this. So even Libya, for example, had a whole nation surveillance system supplied by a French company, Amicis. If we look at Latin America, we can see that nearly all communications from Latin America to Europe, from Latin America to East Asia, pass through the United States, are intercepted in the United States. Even communications from one Latin American country to another often pass through the United States and back.
Can you give me an example of how does...
The National Security Agency alone, which is the premier electronic spy agency in the United States, admitted to Congress that it intercepts 1.6 billion communications per day. There's 7 billion people on the earth.
Could you make a difference between what we could call the state-sponsored surveillance from authoritarian countries or whatever? When you say 1.6 billion, it's quite a big number. And private surveillance, potentially private mass collection of data. Can we make a distinction between state-sponsored surveillance?
Yeah, the interesting thing is not really. That's what's so fascinating. What's happened now is the internet service providers are first shaken down by the government and then become, they self-perceive that they are part of this establishment system. Similarly with Facebook and so on, and Google. They don't see themselves as separate to the US government. They see themselves as part of the establishment, and they trade. Yes, and they
Google.
Yeah, it's a matter of public record that the United States issues hundreds of thousands of national security letters alone in the past 5 years, demanding records. There's no judge involved. It is a criminal offence to reveal that you have given over this information. They develop interfaces, automated interfaces, to fulfill these requests faster because there's so many of these requests.
say that this merger of existing state structures and internet is changing the structure of the states themselves? I would like you to explain us better this idea, this changing that is going on.
Well, the internet is like the nerve systems or arteries of society. Mm-hmm. And society, of course, includes the state. So the merger between the state's internal communications and society's internal communications and the internet is complete. There's very little of a formal nature that doesn't happen on the internet. Yes, there are whispered conversations in corridors, but if you actually want to carry anything out at scale, and states carry things out at scale, then at some stage between the whispered conversations and implementation, information needs to be concretized. It needs to be put into orders and directives and statistics and so on. And all that is happening over the internet. There's a merger of what you might think is a separate system, the banking system. No, that is now also over the internet. So the financial system has also now merged with the internet. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about surveillance of financial transactions, well, if you look at this nationwide surveillance system that the French sold to Gaddafi, Amasis, well, it was intercepting the internet and picking out also financial transactions which were carried out over the internet.
Well, we could say that financial transactions was also the peak of this pyramid, as you describe in the book, of this new system that is underpinning the high-tech communication. Was exactly the economic market?
No, I don't think. What underpins this whole, what underpins the internet is the whole neoliberal system and all the technological development that's happened everywhere in the world, and even the non-neoliberal elements, universities, research centers, and so on. So the internet rests upon all the developments of international civilization. I mean, you know, from cobalt mined out in the Congo to researchers at MIT. So the internet is the peak human technological development. Mm-hmm. So if it's unfortunately that means it's very difficult to have. We can't just take away easily the bad elements of international civilization and still keep the internet, because it depends on all the rest. What we can do is use the power equalization effects or the democratization effects or the educational effects of the internet to the best we can. But we must understand that like rebels using a gun, it implies that there's a gun factory.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, the main weapon that you propose against this mass surveillance is encryption. And as you state, the universe believes in encryption. It's easier to encrypt than to
decrypt. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. It didn't have to be that way. It could just happen to have been that it was just as easy to decrypt something as to encrypt it. Now, cryptography means that an individual or a group of individuals can pit themselves against the full power of a superpower, against the national will of a superpower, and win. Because it does. If you think about a superpower, what is it by definition? Well, it can apply more coercive force than any other power. But it doesn't matter how much coercive force you apply to a math problem. You cannot nuke a math problem out of existence. Math problems seem to be coupled to the basic physics of the world in an important way. And it doesn't matter how much political will there is, you can't change this basic fact of how the world works. So good cryptography, strong cryptography, means that individuals can fight with parity against superpowers. In that particular way. Of course, in many other ways they can't, but in this particular way that they can. And so it is in that aspect, it is a liberating technology. Of course, superpowers also use cryptography to keep their own telecommunications secure. So it is not that it can only be used for liberating purposes. It can also be used by superpowers to increase their dominance. But unlike nuclear weapons, which can only be used by superpowers, really, or major states, cryptography can be used by individuals and smaller groups. And if we go back in time...
Yes, it can be used for what you call, for instance, the four horsemen of the info-apocalypse. So,
yeah, if we go back in time...
Child pornography, terrorism, money laundering, and drug market. So how do you deal with it?
Well, the four horsemen of the info-apocalypse, this phrase is there to show what it is that the propagandists for a greater state control, typically US, constantly spout out. For example, we must apply censorship controls to the entire internet, intercept everything in case one of these activities goes on. And of course, once you erect a mass state surveillance system, just because you want to eliminate one activity, you spy on everyone and have the ability to stop every activity.
And you said that 2013 would be a busy year. Would be busy because WikiLeaks has over 1 million documents prepared to be released. And you said also that in Australia, which is your country, an unelected senator would be replaced by one that is elected. If we put together those two activities, release information and political elections, what can we possibly deduce of it?
Well, you can deduce that, well, let's go back a bit. Since I have been afforded asylum by the Ecuadorian embassy, and that asylum has been supported by nearly all of Latin America, my position is more stable. And that has permitted us to plan ahead much more than we could have before. In 2011, at the beginning of 2012, we were in a very fragile, constant battle, which at any moment could have seen me extradited, other people arrested, this vicious banking blockade, which we have fought by Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Western Union, Money Bookers, Bank of America.
To strangle...
To strangle us, completely extrajudicial, completely unlawful. We've won against it in the only court case that has been taken. These sort of ongoing attacks made it quite hard for us to plan. And the organisation was really at a critical juncture. But since gaining asylum here, we've been able to plan and stabilise more. And that's great because we've been able to develop systems and projects that we've been wanting to do for quite a long time. And that includes a political campaign in Australia, and it also includes some very...
That you will be a candidate in a political campaign in the Australian Parliament, that's it?
Yes.
For the Senate?
Yes.
This year?
This year.
WikiLeaks has definitely changed your life, has changed the life of Bradley Manning, a 25-year-old soldier, which is in prison since July 2010 and under very harsh conditions.
Very.
Yes. I would like to ask you, how did this affect yourself personally and the WikiLeaks staff?
The imprisonment of Bradley Manning?
In terms of the work, in terms of...
it's not unexpected, these sorts of things. I mean, we've had a number of people, both before and after Bradley, in similar positions. And our own staff are embroiled in the grand jury proceedings that are ongoing in the United States now for more than 2 years. So we have over a dozen different court cases and legal actions around the world. As far as the United States is concerned, the United States has said formally in its own official documentation that the investigation against us is of unprecedented scale and nature, that it is a, quote, whole of government investigation, unquote. And we've seen that come out in documentation over a dozen different US agencies involved. So it's a big deal. That's part of the fight. But we know all those resources are being invested because we're hitting home.
And what are your plans as a...
I'm afraid I'm really going to have to quit. I'm sure you realize.
Well, I understand.
Pleasure.